Okay, so we got the little kid peeing up here, and we've got this corn plant. So the story we're telling with this corn plant, it's amazing if you give a plant, an animal, a kid, if we change his environment. If you get a kid to start reading when he's 2, just think about how much further along he's going to be when he gets in kindergarten at 5 or 6 versus just learning from your kindergarten teacher. Same thing with a plant or a perennial or a tree. And this plant here in the garden, we gave ample space. We had our kid use it as target practice to potty train. And over the course of the summer, because we changed the venue of this plant, you knew the answer from this morning, but how many years did this put on? 31. So think about that, how the plant recognizes the sunlight. It's pretty hard in our brains to think that everything that is living has a mind and is going to contort to how we treat it. But until you put that in your head, it's going to be really hard to understand the value of polycropping, of these things that we do on social media. What is the value of giving things away for free? It doesn't show up right away, but it shows up later on. And that's the value of experimenting on the farm, is doing things differently, examining that on a daily or weekly basis, and then redesigning, revising what you had done the previous year. So that was a big part, that learning kind of changed my mindset, the ability for plants to think for themselves. I do a lot of traveling, and thank you. It's such a privilege to have people's attention. It's such a privilege to be able to travel and see these different spots in the world. I don't know, I think it'd be pretty frustrating, all these conversations I'm hearing in the hallways about what if it doesn't rain, what if we don't get any more snow. I've got wheat contracted, and I don't realize how lucky and fortunate we are that it rains back in Indiana. But anyway, there's my Twitter page. If you don't follow me on Twitter, that's where I do most of my sharing. It's Jason Mauck 1. And this page was last year. We've already gained 4,000 followers or something in the last year. And we created this Farm Weird as a venue for other farmers to share what they're doing on their farm in different contexts. This is Ben Peckman here. This is alfalfa in his corn. So think about if we can grow nearly the same amount of corn, whiting the rows, how much value it would have for the cattle if we could have an alfalfa begin. Are we creating nitrogen for year 2 or 3 later? So the other thing that I really enjoy is starting things, and how does that change people's lives? I really enjoy ribeyes and steak. I know that the steak that is in the pan there, I employed 25 people to cut that meat up. We're creating, hopefully, a decentralized food network in our community where we bring these skill sets back that have left these communities in the last 20 or 30 years. And nothing against the Walmarts of the world, but we see where we're headed, right? We went from the mom and pops to the Walmarts to the Bezos, and what's next? That's really what we need to ask. And is that a better life, especially for the rural communities? And I would argue, no, I don't know. So, I really have a passion, even if it doesn't pop off the page on a financial win right off the bat, of figuring out decentralized systems to hopefully enrich the community. This is another thing we do at Muncie Meets. I'll get here to the end. These automated fundraisers allow sports teams, churches, organizations to earn money to buy shoes or bats or whatever. And there's a lot of work that goes into getting a picture like this. You know, that idea begins 4, 5, 6 months earlier in the design of the e-commerce, of the Squarespace, and all the stuff that it takes to make that possible. So my background, both sides of my family farm now. This is my grandpa here on the left. Just talked to him on the phone before this presentation. He's watching us fill up the semis with corn. Never met Harley, my great-grandpa. But I got to tell you, I do a lot of these concepts, and I'm starting to work on my grandpa, but he really thought I was just lost my mind about 6 or 7 years ago when I was doing this. You know, we were harvesting weed at 20% and mixing it into dry weed, and there's just a lot of stressful moments where you didn't really have that idea of where I was headed with it. And thankfully, he's starting to believe a little bit more as we progress on. Now, my other grandpa, Papa Lou, he was quite the maverick and innovator. He would be in the magazines like this Top Op. He went from doing conventional farming. He was one of the first to do ridge till, and he narrowed the rows to 20-inch rows. And he was always thinking a little bit different, but kind of onto himself. And honestly, Grandpa, you know, I'm just so close to him because he spent his time with me on the farm, and him not so much. So, you know, you can learn good things and you can learn bad things from your experience. And I always say that, you know, every interaction with people is an opportunity for you either to gain or lose respect for yourself or someone else. So really value the time that you have. Sometimes it's just one interaction with people, and that's very valuable thing. You know, we're all so busy, sometimes it's good to just slow down, and people appreciate that. But this is back home. I like to share this story. This is a picture in 1953. You know, Muncie, Indiana was, you know, we had gas lines, we had all these, we had Chevy, we had New Venture Gear, we had all these industries that were paying people good money, and they've all left. And this mindset continues in agriculture where it's produce, produce, produce. And the problem with that is there's other countries doing the same thing. And if we're racing to the bottom, we're basically in a bar fight. And if you're at the bar fight with a guy that does nothing to lose, you're probably going to lose. And kind of an analogy here, but you know, this industrial model was really founded by Henry Ford, which figured out if I put this assembly line and these machines in place, I can make a man's hands 10 times more valuable. And that went into farming, like my Papa Lou here, putting a more powerful engine and pulling a plow faster made him more valuable with his time. So it's a kind of a paradigm shift to think, who can I engage with these ideas? Who can I employ? What arrangements can I put in place? How can I move livestock? What can I do in this world today to create things where I don't have to produce it all with my bare hands, or I don't have to burn fuel to turn the ground over or something like that? It's just, you know, I'm fascinated with redesigning things. This is my grandma Heaton here. She really showed me and encouraged this way to make a bountiful garden. I just remember growing up, she would have the catalogs, the Burpee catalogs, and she just made it happen in real life. And watching people do something like that is pretty impressive. Here's Dad, threw me up on the cow here. And that's how he kind of taught me growing up, is if you're going to learn something, it's one thing to listen to someone's advice, but the real value is watching an example taking place. And he taught me to learn, you just got to start doing it. You can't steer the ship if it's not moving. That's who I farm with today, mostly Neil there. He's the one filling the trucks back home. We're all going to be dead in 100 years, so let's live dangerously. Mike Leach, do you guys follow him much? You see how he just passed about a month ago, and I really loved his air raid defense. He couldn't recruit the fastest recruits, and he figured out with time and space and sequence and throwing the football 40, 50 times a game, he could really exploit defenses. So this is a tree in my yard I see every morning, and it's a great example of genetic expression. That tree by itself with sunlight and water is a completely different plant than it had been in the forest. It does not have to compete. If we think that way, if we start really looking at the patterns of nature, whether it's a seashell, a sunflower, a weather system, a galaxy, everything is designed to survive or thrive based on, have you guys seen some anemic sunflowers or a very big sunflower head, you're going to see the same pattern within it. So I want to stop here because I'm sorry, this is very difficult to present the same slides twice. Do you guys have any directions that you'd like me to go or have any questions that's kind of burning in your mind? We'll make this a little bit more casual. Anything this far? Okay.
Yeah, well, you'll probably get to it later.
Yep.
But about your meat processing.
Yep.
Plant and all that. And you go into that more.
Yep. Yes, yeah. We can slide through the plants and we'll get more into the meat processing. Yep, thank you. So my background with the cropping systems, why I look at things a little bit differently. I was a landscape contractor in my 20s. So when I was little, I would always steal corn out of the grain bin, and I had about 20 or 30 different fields in my yard where, you know, a corner where I could put a corn here, and I'd take the cat crap and put it on here. I'd farm in my sandbox. So I always just had kind of this green thumb. And after I got my degree in marketing, in school, you know, I wanted to come back to the farm. There just wasn't room for me. And I tried dressing up with suit and tie for a year or two, and I really wasn't that great of a salesman because I was too nice of a guy to make up some lie to close the deal like some of the vets would. So I got my hands dirty with landscape contracting, and I called these living billboards. So if I had the privilege to get a new landscaping account, we would really look at the beginning of the year. So we wanted to plant bulbs in the fall. We'd have our daffodils, our tulips raised, and then we would plant these real cheap plants in between those spring plants. And I was constantly figuring out what colors are the blooms going to be, when are they going to bloom, how are we going to have the height and the arrangement and the bouquet. So when I came back to the farm, it just didn't really make much sense to grow one crop. So I was more comfortable with canopy, more comfortable with diversity. And I figured out with these examples, when you look at this Dusty Miller here, that's one plant that started very small. It changes how it grows, just like the tree, if we can spread the rows out. So this evolved into what I go around and talk about, polycropping, of taking two different plants and two different seasons and figuring out how we can exploit plant yield and different ancillary benefits to lower our inputs. So what do you notice about this field on the left? Yeah, it's monocrop, it's leaner, some capture. Do you ever really have to use herbicide in wheat? Usually not. So our weed control can be taken care of. But we're wasting our valuable days here drying this down. If we would give up a little bit of space here, we can change the shape and get something started like soybeans. So instead of starting at 0, putting in 3 times more seed, we can have a plant already in potting, already expressing itself and creating this venue. So what do we notice about this right here? This is a Fibonacci spiral, Fibonacci sequence. Had any of you, raise your hand, who had ever really looked into the golden ratio and that kind of stuff before I started talking about it? Got a few hands here. So does this make sense with genetic expression of how we can get a bigger plant if we think about its lens? Okay, great. So you notice that this is fractal in nature. So the same loop right here is the same loop right here, which is the same loop right here. So the value of getting things started is getting through the sequence, the 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. Getting a plant started allows us to get further along in the sequence when we harvest the crop that went through senescence. So how can we use this mindset to get out of the annuals and into things like perennials? So I'll show this video for the people that didn't see this morning. This is technology. We helped a company called Flexi Finger. They were coming out with these crop lifters, and I made a video on Twitter about 7 years ago with Play-Doh and the kids' plastic combine, kind of going this idea of schematics of how we could protect the soybeans. So you see these pads pushing the soybeans down, bringing in the wheat, and now we're creating a new venue for the soybeans to reflect that solar corridor, or reflect that solar energy into the soybeans. And we had over 100 bushel soybeans here, which was kind of an eye-opener to the local farmers, because a lot of the local farmers hadn't really been able to crack the 100 bushel, and here we are raising 30 bushel wheat in between those rows. So this kind of goes through that process. I'll speed through here. We've got 60-inch centered wheat, soybeans in between. That wheat will express out. We really got to be cognizant of what we're working with. So if we're working with corn or wheat, we really want to space that out enough so we can allow a solar corridor in there to start the next crop. And what we're really cognizant here is the reflection between the expression and inflection. So we've got here our wheat population. As we push density, we choke off the sunlight and the water availability of the next crop. So, as we choke this back, we can raise 50, 60, 70% of the wheat on 20, 30, 40% of the seed and nearly not affect the other crop. And there's been a lot of talk outside of I know it doesn't rain as much here. Could we really choke back, widen it out, use a stripper header, get some of these attributes of snow catch or block the wind? We can change the microclimate of that other crop. There's our harvest system. And we change what the plant does. So this is your normal plant in a monocrop. This is how we change that with those wide spacings, earlier planting versus the double crop. So you can see right here, it really isn't important if we have as many plants. So if I don't have to have as many plants, I can plant the same or less of a row population with less rows and wider rows and exploit that plant yield phenomenon in two different crops. So we've done that with corn and soybeans as well. This is what really interests me is we can do polycropping with two commodities, but what is a product that we can sell in the local community? Meat, eggs. If we have the processing in place and we can convert that livestock into a sellable product, that is a way that we can get the livestock back on the land. So when we were kind of learning this plant yield phenomenon and what arrangements we could make, eventually we started discussing how can we integrate livestock between the rows of crops. So if we look at how we would change the corn just like the wheat here, by having this gap, we empower 4 rows to yield twice as much as a row by itself. So if the center row would yield maybe a little bit more, getting some light in there, then we can basically get 150 to 160, 170% of the total yield of the field, giving up a gap and allowing livestock to go in between here. So that thought process, let's test it. So in 2020, we had the opportunity to buy real estate. We could convert the pasture over to organic, and we made several of these little livestock modules that go in between there. So this is another little tangent here. A lot of times I talk to farmers and they have this great idea, but they don't want to share it with anybody because they think they can go back home and make more money on it or whatever. And it's a thing, if you don't test these narratives in your head, let's say I profess that I'm a mathematician. Well, I can keep that narrative in my head if I don't go hang out with other mathematicians. You know what I mean? So I think it's very important to evolve quickly. If we have an idea or if we have something to test your narrative, put it out into the world, put your idea out into the world, let people be your critic, let the reality of the results be your critic. And if you can speed up that cycle, we're going to speed up our learning process quite a bit. So we thought of this idea, let's do something about it. We could go to Lowe's, and I spent, I don't know, $1,500, $2,000 on tarps and 2x4s, and we made 14 of these chicken tractors. Now, it's not as technologically advanced as the further stack cropper I'll get to. We had to burn a lot of calories to do this, but we had a couple interns that summer, and we moved these things 2 or 3 times a day. And I was amazed how well this arrangement worked, where we have a thick cover crop, the animals go right up to it, and the sheep are actually better than a weed eater. If I were going to gas up a weed eater and try to clean this up, I'm going to be hitting all kinds of stuff. They can stick their neck out of the fence, use their sticky tongue, bring that in, and they're just a machine and a tool, and also they got a fertilizer spreader coming out right underneath their tail there. So we ran chickens, sheep through here. And there's a guy in Iowa, Zach Smith, doing the same thing. And because I had a prior arrangement with Joe Bassett, we got together in the winter of 20 and created our first iteration of stock cropper. The idea is we can collect water. We used solar energy to propel this thing. And that's another thought here. We're talking about exploiting plant population or what have you. Taking this little amount of solar energy, if I wanted to go out and pull a 6-bottom plow with a solar panel, I'd get maybe a foot, right? That's asking that a lot. But if I want to move this light piece of steel 10 feet, what I'm doing with that little amount of energy is I'm moving sheep, pigs, chickens, and I'm delegating this work of fertilizer, of pruning to the animals. So it's kind of an amplification of that investment with the stock cropper. So we had a little trial here at my farm let's see if this plays. So I had a lot of friends, family come out and move this forward. And it's really cool seeing the sheep just light up and get excited about the new buffet that they have in place there.
So you were doing sheep in the front and chicken in the back?
Sheep in the front, chickens in the back. And there's room for pigs if we'd like to add them to the equation as well.
You have much of a problem with chickens.
What's that?
You have much of a problem with chickens getting stuck in the
Yes. So I didn't put this video, so we created a fluffer.
They all got caught.
Yes. So the way we call it a fluffer, and what it does is you install it right on the end, and it moves a beater like this with these little soft fingers, and it just lightly taps them. And it keeps from running them over. But that is a good point. Usually we have to have a kid or something spook them while we move them. But they kind of get used to it eventually. So the beautiful thing about stock cropper and this idea, you know, we really focus on the details of this stuff. It's more about the principle. It doesn't matter if it's a pumpkin plant, a weed, grass, as long as it's palatable. As Jim talked, it's got nutrients, it's got protein. And if we can get the cropping schematic right up to the sheep and the multiple livestock, they're going to clean that up right to the edge of the crop. So think about organic corn production. You know, we celebrate what we don't do with organic. And there's a lot of people kind of talking about why don't we celebrate the nutrient density and all the good attributes. The problem, the fundamental problem with the organic space is the fertility, and we're trying to create a better product over here, but we're trucking in this stale, rotten manure from CAFOs. We're burning up all this diesel to drop that manure onto the farm, and now we're chasing nitrogen and phosphorus, and we're getting all of our nutrients out of balance. This would be a way if we would, we're using wheel motors and RTK and all this fancy stuff, but we could pull this with a winch. We could have multiple of these coops going into a large-scale field and then close loop those nutrients. So another project we've done that I would like to do more of is this community garden aspect. You can see the armor on the soil. We have the moisture to grow very thick rye in the fall, push that down. And if you can figure out how to keep the weeds at bay and preserve moisture, we can transplant any plant that we want out here and plant about anything if we don't have to worry about weeds and herbicides and all that kind of stuff. So there's an example of that. So now we're into the woods aspect. I've got 12,000 pigs right across from my house in the concrete jungle. There's efficiencies to that. We bottle up their heat. We have manure for our farm. But I really, truly enjoy putting these pigs out in the woods. So we grab about 60 pigs. These are seconds. My cousins have a Berkshire show pig business. And if it's not good enough to win the county fair, he'll just give it to me, and we kind of mellow these muscled up pigs out in the woods. Now the cool thing about the pigs is we can take a forest full of ivy and brush and delegate all the work of all those hooves and snouts to reset and change the venue for grass to grow. And it's just amazing to see trampled down, we chainsaw it, and we can get a lush grass with precip, especially once the leaves start to fall into fall, and then we get that regrowth in the spring. Okay, we're to the meat part. So in 2020, we're doing these projects. We called around, and the reason for the calls, our grocery store shelves were nearly empty. Ground beef was $9 a pound. And you remember what corn and soybeans and other crops did in 2020? They were worth nothing. I mean, I think beef was $1.18, corn was 3 something, low 3, maybe high 2s. So we had the opportunity to buy Muncie Meats, which has been in business since 1957. But it's basically just a cold 12,000 square foot cold storage place. It was box in meat, box out. We had a bunch of restaurants. So it was my goal in 2020 to collaborate with local harvest facilities and start investing in the machines and the workforce to be able to buy livestock from local farmers and process that into sellable products in different distribution channels. So this is one of our places we work with in Bourbon, and those are our pigs in the woods. And I don't know if I have many slides regarding the beef there. Oh, I got one back here. Yeah, past this property, we'll get back on that. Yeah, right here. So the difficulty, if you don't have a harvest facility inside your meat shop, we had to come up with a way of transporting these carcasses back to Muncie Meats. So good old learning from the seed corn business. These half seed boxes we could clean out, and each animal is tracked with our facility. So we know exactly where the livestock was made, each piece of meat. It's called the Bob system, and each one of these carcasses come back in Muncie Meats on his own box. So this allows us to work with multiple harvest facilities closer to different farmers to bring that back into Muncie Meats. And with that thought, if I can let that linchpin do what they're good at, then I could focus on an investment. We've got a roll stock machine here. We've got several patty machines here, different packaging, different rooms. This is Sean Stetson right here. You know, going back to the earlier statement about the value of meeting new people and understanding what they're good at, what they want to do, I would have never bought Muncie Meats to begin with if I had never met Sean Stetson. He was a manager at Lahody's down the road. He had a passion for the same thing. So when this came about, this opportunity, the first thing that I did was call Sean Stetson to see if he would be up for it. And he was all about it. And sometimes things might not happen right away, but it's having those contacts in your phone and having those present conversations with people that you can kind of rehash things when new opportunities come afloat. So all these things that we've worked and learned on our farm gave myself and others the confidence to develop a destination place for these projects. And my big value proposition with stock cropper is not so much the annuals. If I get back to the stock cropper right here, what I think we can do with this, the fundraisers that we've created thus far with all the local schools, we've worked with 15 to 20 schools within our county and all the extended counties. Instead of growing corn and annual stuff like that, we'll still do that, but we will open up to field trips. So K through 3, you know, first and second graders, retirement homes, special needs, Hillcroft. Bring these kids, adults out, and instead of corn, we can buy a root stock of blueberries, of raspberries, of apple trees for very cheap. You know, if you get a tree when it's very small, you might only have $1 in it. Now, its value in 5 years of the orchard might exceed $10,000 in value of fruit. So how do we bridge that gap? Well, if I can have people pay me $7, $8, $10 to come see our farm, and I've got $1 in the perennial, I can pre-drill holes in the designated spot depending on the species and change different iterations of stock cropper and intergraze that perennial in that time that it takes to go from the rootstock to production. And by having multiple people come out and plant that, it's going to give them a compelling reason to want to come back and see the progress. We can also put a stake, some kind of identification by each plant. So if little Johnny planted it in 2024 and he comes back, you know, 4 years later, he'll be able to go out and find that identification of what he did. So that's what I'm hoping to do with this destination with that technology in the future. So we're also looking at space here. We had 192 acres to begin with, and instead of building this massive golf course that would take tons of natural resources and time, we just designed 3 greens amongst here, and it took about 6 acres of better turf to create a 50-hole golf experience. We can stretch this out as long as a PGA Tour event from different tee-off stations. You can see our progress here. We started from bare dirt, and this is September, and this is May or June. I enjoy this kind of stuff, and it takes daily, you know, I slung sand on the greens quite a bit, a lot of water, a lot of time, a lot of TLC, but that time got me to here this summer. And this is a venue that we saw as an opportunity to bring the kids out. We have concerts, we had a cross-country meet, and this design here, what we'd like to do, we've got all these different perennials. We might have a restaurant, a brewery, a music venue. We want to put where everything is on these kind of navigational beacons going forward. And all I'm trying to do here is create a model that hopefully can go other places in the United States and have a reason for people to have a compelling reason for people to stay in that community. Another idea with the stock cropper, when we had this real estate boom, you have all these communities that moved, and the value of their home might be $300,000 or $400,000. If the market comes out and the value of homes start coming down, maybe the simple community garden that has hens and a stock cropper and something that kind of brings everyone together will kind of keep the value of the community and keep people engaged. I think there'll be a lot of that green space mentality as we go forward. So this is, how are we going to create a direct conduit of value? We can produce very high quality product, but the fact of the matter is probably Jeff Bezos is going to make most of the money in this Whole Foods selling your products that you raised on your farm. So I saw this opportunity a few years back, and we created this system called the Automated Farmers Market. And what this kiosk allows us to do is to find very valuable pieces of real estate that isn't being used. We can plug this thing into a billboard. We just need 220, and we've got 20 different lockers that can be flipped multiple times per day. And I got a little video here explaining with Sam here how that works. So customers will, yep, go ahead.
You just got 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So what have we not covered here? I think we got through most of this. If we only got 5 minutes, I'd love to open it up for questions. Yep, go ahead.
How quick payoff on that automated farmers market, and what kind of margin would you recommend?
Okay, so the automated farmers market is $52,000. We got a 5-year lease on it. Our fixed costs are about $1,100. We got a $47 electric bill, usually a month, and we pay 2% back. So if we're getting 40% margin retail, then you need to get about $6,000 to $8,000 in sales a month to pay for that. And we accomplished that about a year in. And right now we're selling between $12,000 to $15,000 usually a month out of that kiosk.
Those are refrigerated compartments?
Yes, yep, they can be from -10. You can actually be warm too. You could keep hot food in one. Yeah, the column can change. So each column can be a different temperature. Yep.
Is that pre-ordered food, or can a customer walk up and purchase it?
We would love to cross that bridge, so everything is pre-ordered. And yeah, they can choose anything on our e-commerce site, and then we fill it twice a day. We would love to do that, and I know how to do it. It's just a QR code that we pump out. We'd like to do it. Yep.
Are you marketing, I know you said you like doing the pigs in the woods, are you marketing those different than your other?
Yes.
Confiners?
Yep, so we can ask about twice as much for that pork. And you just kind of, what I would like to do going forward is collaborate with more farmers doing that and to have more supply. And if you've got a high quality product and you keep it very finite, you don't have the pressure to sell quite a bit of it, then you can, gradually build that market and ask for those higher prices. Yep.
Sorry, I know you already asked this now, but like in these stands, would you say higher quality meat, or are you guys going for select, choice, prime, or do you have different options?
Yeah, we've got everything. So we've got box beef, normal box beef. We've got legacy. We've got farmers, and the thing we've been really waiting on. We've got a harvest facility locally it's in Fairmount, Indiana, and we should be open pretty soon. We'll have a USDA grader there, so we can actually have a USDA grade. Anything else? All right. Well, I thank you guys for having me over to Burlington, and hopefully I get to see you guys again here next few years. So anyway, thank you.